This is the Effing Business Podcast. You ask the questions, we answer. All right, episode 28, here we go. Aaron, I want to talk about today is risk-taking, exactly.
Not the game.
I want to talk about the game of taking risks over playing it safe. Different business owners do this different ways. We're a bit of a risk-taker when it comes to things, so I want to talk about that. Where it takes people, where it doesn't take people, where it brings people, where it doesn't bring people.
So let's start by defining risk.
Okay.
When you hear risk, what do you think?
On a business sense, I think it's taking leaps. What I mean by that is I think it's taking some information, taking some data, but not a collective like hard grinded into answer and saying, okay, X and Z and Y and so on. So taking a couple of information points and saying, okay, you know what, I think it's going to work. I think this should happen, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm 80% sure. I think that's the risk. I think a lot of people say if it's not 100%, I don't want it.
So I'll be honest with you, in 10 years, I have never really felt that we've done anything that was risky, because we've talked about it, we've thought it through, and many times it failed. So because of that failure, we've learned, like, okay, don't do this or don't do it this way. We've got to think how to improve that.
And the question isn't
lessons
and risks or lessons.
I understand that, but I'm getting somewhere. So what I'm saying is that I think that when you know a lot about a subject,
right,
and you invest based off of that, right? No one says, "Oh, that guy's taking a risk," right? Whereas you don't know something and you go invest, that's risky. You don't know what you're doing, right? So like, I think for us, we passed the risky point. We got out of bed. We started a business. We didn't know what we were doing. Right. We've overcome that hurdle. That risk, like I remember we were at that Salesforce conference in Chicago and we were having lunch and there was a guy next to us at like the lunch table and he's like, "Wow, I can't believe." What's so funny? I can't believe like I've always, like, I work for a company and I've always wanted to like start my own company and like, here's my idea. This is what I want to do. And I was just like I don't see it the other way. Like what choice did we have, right, when we did it? So like,
right.
So every time we do something, I don't feel like, oh, this is risky. Okay, I think the risks we've taken is that we had an idea, it was a good idea, didn't always work out, but we did it without like truly affording it.
Right. So you're taking macro risk, right? Like, so macro risk would be like.
I'm even talking about micro risk.
Oh no, but I mean by macro risk is like we went into business not knowing how to be a business person, not knowing anything about the business, like
the industry, didn't have any money to like use as a runway.
Exactly. So like that is like the ultimate of risk of a risk. But
once we got past that, nothing feels like it could hurt. Well, I don't mean it that way, but knock on wood.
But when it comes to those risks, those are like once in a lifetime risks, right? Those are humongous leaps.
Right.
Right? I think those are leaps that people aren't willing to do. What I think we had compared to other people is we didn't have a backup plan, and that played to our
like, if this doesn't work, we'll go do something else.
Right. They always playing like, but I always have that degree.
They're hedging their bets.
Accountant, right? So as soon as the road gets rocky, they're like, accountant world, here I come. Right? Or I have that degree in economics. I'll become a finance manager at some bank or whatever, right? Whatever it may be. And I think we didn't have that. So when the road got rocky, we just had to keep going down that road and get bigger tires.
Essentially, yeah.
Right? Like, we just had to keep going, and I think that's why the risk for us of going out and going out into a business we've never been into, never been in business, never doing any of that, being young and stupid, I think helped us with the risk.
For sure.
Right? In retrospect, like if we had a backup plan, we probably would have bailed out earlier.
For sure, 100%.
Right? But like we had no backup plan, so there was no like, where are we gonna go?
Every time things were hard for us, especially in the beginning, the first couple of years, we're like, okay, what should we do instead? And then it's like, we don't have any other options. All right, let's figure out how to make this work. Right. So I think getting back to like the topic, getting back to risk specifically, I think people see this giant leap or this giant mountain they have to climb, right? And that's what they see as a risk. I don't think that's ever really been our thinking. Okay. Correct. So I think the biggest risks we've taken were we had ideas, we went to execute the ideas, but we didn't look at our financials. So we didn't match up, okay, is this even doable today? Like, do we have the runway for this to work? Right. And then we had to pull back, or we had to modify, or like, okay, it's a little soon, or it's a really good idea, but if you can't afford to execute the idea, then it's not really that good of an idea because you can't do it. So yeah, I think those are the mistakes we've made. Those are the risks we took.
I think ideas, when it comes to like business growth and things like that, need to be looked at like wine. Yeah, and you need to have wine isn't good the day you make it. right? No, it just isn't.
You're saying as it ages,
You
it gets
need
better?
you need to have enough time for it to sit in a warehouse and take up space and basically sit in a barrel for 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 years for it to really mature and really become a real great idea. But before that, it's just vinegar.
I concur. As somebody who's incredibly impatient, patient is like a huge ingredient to success.
Patience, and if you don't have the money or time or to have that idea blossom and become something, then you're not really, you've gone beyond, you are taking a risk, and beyond taking a risk, you're just fooling yourself that it's going to work, because you can't, it's not going to work. It's not going to work if you don't give it the time.
But you also have to be able to afford the time.
Right,
And I think
that's
that's
what I
where
mean.
we've ran into like problems. Like, so once upon a time we owned a decent amount of stock, but we couldn't really afford to own the stock. So we had to sell the stock.
Right.
And we lost a lot of money as a result. Had we not sold the stock, we would have made money on all those stocks.
Right.
I know what you want to say right now, but we're not going to say that in the podcast. So you have to, I think the risk is when you do something that may seem like a great idea, but you're not ready to do that. You can't afford to do that yet. And I think that's like one of the areas like I'm guilty of this. We had all these ideas. Oh, let's do this. Let's do that. It's like, whoa, let's slow down. Let's pull back. Let's execute the very specific ideas. Like I saw something on the weekend I shared with a friend where somebody said that you don't see a lot of people getting very rich from executing 50 ideas. They got very rich from doing one or two things, and then with their money they invested in a bunch of other things.
Right.
So I think it's the same thing like for us. Over time, we're like learning to do less and not more. Like we're like narrowing our focus, and
Right.
this way we're in a way cutting out some risk that we would have opened ourselves up to because we weren't ready to take those leaps.
But risks are what got us here.
Agreed.
We learned that risks got us here, but risks aren't going to get us to where we want to be. Risks are great things to do. I'm very much, I think he's the impatient one. I have more patience. I'm willing to take the risks more than he is. I like to stand at the curb.
You're willing to take the risks more? What does that mean?
I like standing at the edge.
You
and
just
looking over.
think that like you could walk into a bank, rob the bank like on camera, and they're not going to be able to identify you and catch you. Like I'm not
risky.
that stupid, right? You know, like I
Is it
know that
stupid or risky?
I call it stupid. You
I
call it
haven't been caught
risky.
yet. Just saying.
Well, now you know where he is.
But I think patience is a huge virtue to the risk, right? Like if you're willing to risk it, then you have to have the patience for it to work.
But then there's also the flip side where like what you're doing isn't working, but because you're super patient, you think, okay, just give it time.
There's
and then,
there's patience and then there's ignorance. Right? There's a
Okay.
difference.
So you're saying you have to know when it's not working.
Right. You like when something's not working, it's not about time. When time's the real thing, like we're seeing traction, but it just needs a little bit more time. Then okay, I'll just have some more patience. But when it's not working at all, nothing's moving, so on and so forth, it's not all of a sudden going to sprout.
So define patience. What does patience look like?
I think patience are when the determining factor or something is time.
Okay, so what time frames should people subscribe to? How long?
Let's say you go over a certain business idea, right, to grow in a certain market,
Right.
right, and you set a certain amount of time. In 6 months, we're going to reconvene and we're going to look over this idea, this new market. Come back in 6 months, and it's not where you want it to be. It's halfway or 3/4. So now it's a question of time. Did we give it enough time to get where it needs to be, or is it a scrappable idea, or is it you gave it 6 months, it's only at a quarter, but like it was early on in the venture, early on in the market, and it fizzled out and has died since then, basically. Right, so the number is still halfway or a quarter to where you want it to be, but it was early. You got into the market, people got excited, people showed up to your new restaurant, whatever it may be. They showed up, they all think it sucks. The market didn't buy into your new taco stand on the corner of 5th and Frank, and they wanted a different type of food, and your taco stand isn't going to work there.
So it doesn't matter how long you're there, you're never going to make it.
Exactly. The same variable is true.
So what you're saying is you have to keep measuring, and as long as the measurables are in your favor, then you just need
The
patience.
measurables are in your favor, but in the time is really the problem.
Right, but if the measurables are not in your favor, time isn't going to heal it.
Correct.
Time likely will not change for the positive.
Correct.
Will help the problem change for the positive.
Right. That was a really great episode. Episode 28. Calling it a day.
As we debate if it's a new podcast.
We'll do a new podcast on episode 29 now.
Not even a pee break?
Not even a pee break?
Not even check your cell phone break?